Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's get started by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. In today's newspaper, we have plenty of important articles, and from the Delhi edition, I have chosen 11 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive coverage so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. So before we start, I have a very important announcement. I want to talk to you about Unacademy's Platinum program. See, most students tell us that in online learning, one of the biggest drawback is that they don't have a seamless interaction with the educators and they don't feel motivated enough to stay concentrated in the class. So to fix this problem statement, we launched Unacademy Platinum that provides for a two-way interaction with a mandatory camera on policy where the educators can see the students, and these batch sizes are kept deliberately small so that we can pay individual attention to the students. It encourages a two-way interaction where you can ask your doubts, get it resolved immediately, and improves your attention span as the educators can hold you accountable on a day-to-day basis. And if you want to enroll for the platinum program, you need to look at the plus points of platinum as compared to the other programs that we have, that is plus and iconic. You will get live and recorded lectures from our top educators in all the three programs. But where Platinum stands out is with the camera on policy that provides for the two-way interaction, along with access to all the study material, the test series, and more importantly, the one-on-one mentorship. And the mentorship is not with subject matter experts, but with the educators themselves. Your respective educators will hold one-on-one mentorship sessions regularly so that they can guide and motivate you and provide you with the right strategy. So if you're interested to enroll, please check out the details by clicking on the link provided in the description box below. With this, let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 6, there is an editorial that focuses on the topic of imported inflation. This article will help us understand the current status of the Indian economy, the rising concern about inflation, particularly imported inflation. So, what do you mean by imported inflation? That is something we'll try to understand in this article. See, recently the CPI data was brought out, the consumer price index that serves as an indicator of retail level inflation for the month of March. And the inflation was registered at 3.4%. Now, when you compare this with the previous month of February, it was at around 3.2%. So CPI inflation has seen just a marginal increase. At least that's how it appears initially. And also don't forget, recently CPI's base year has been changed to 2024. And the CPI index itself has been revamped with a new basket of goods. Now, when I compare this with wholesale price inflation captured through WPI, there is an alarming trend which is quite visible. WPI inflation has jumped to 3.88% in the month of March, and this is a 38-month high. It's the highest wholesale price inflation registered in the past 38 months. In Feb, it was just around 2.4%. So you can see the significant jump in WPI inflation. Of course, one has to keep in mind that WPI has a different base year altogether. It has not been updated. It is still measured with 2011-12 as the base year. Whereas for CPI, the base year has been updated. Of course, we need to keep this in mind while drawing any conclusions or inferences from this. But this stark difference between CPI, WPI inflation and the sudden jump that you see from the month of Feb to March is a clear indicator that war-induced inflation is being experienced by the Indian economy. The ongoing Iran war and the disruption of shipping through Hormuz Strait has crippled the supply chain of critical fuels like crude oil, gas, and we are already feeling that impact with the jump in wholesale prices. So when any external development leads to surge in prices of essential commodities, and eventually we increase the import bill because of the rising prices, and the prices are passed down to the consumer level, that is what we refer to as imported inflation. So this could be a result of global economic shocks, or it could be because of supply chain disruption. It could be because of geopolitical tensions, or it is a combination of all of them. So when these external events, when they influence the prices of important commodities, could be food commodities or minerals or fuel, and the prices go up, increasing your import bill. So as the import bill jumps, eventually the prices would be passed down to the consumer level. Right now, we are not feeling this or seeing this at the consumer level, mainly because there are few protective measures in place. But the price rise is being felt at the wholesale level. That is what we can infer from this data. CPI inflation has only seen a moderate jump, but WPI inflation has seen a significant jump in the month of March. So, how can India shield itself and protect itself from the impact of imported inflation? For a country like India, which is so dependent on key imports, it is very essential to focus on tackling imported inflation. So, when you look at RBI's inflation target, the Monetary Policy Committee has been given a target of 4%. That is the ideal inflation rate to be maintained. But this has a flexible range of plus or minus 2%. So, for the Monetary Policy Committee, the goal is to keep inflation within the 2 to 6% range with the ideal target of 4%. Now, you might say that we are well within the safe range. Yes, but down the down the line in the next few weeks and few months, if the conflict were to continue and escalate, if the disruptions were to continue, the imported inflation will keep on passing on, and you will see a jump in our import bill that will directly impact our current account deficit. And this can trigger a macroeconomic chain reaction. Because also, please note, the Indian rupee has been performing very poorly amongst all the currencies in Asia and as well as amongst the peer developing nations. Rupee is one of the worst performing currencies. And especially in the last few weeks, the Indian rupee has depreciated by 2.5 to 3%. And this significantly impacts our import bill again. Because much of the oil and gas that we import, it is traded in US dollars. So in relation to the dollar, the Indian rupee has depreciated by 2.5 to 3%, and this directly adds to the cost. So that's the macroeconomic challenge that we are talking about, the cascading effect that imported inflation can have on the economy. So it becomes very important for India to build resilience, to become more self-reliant and reduce these vulnerabilities. And of course, this is something that you can't achieve in the short term, right? There needs to be medium long-term measures to switch India away from fossil fuels as much as possible. Focus more on clean, renewable energy, adopt electric transportation, scale up nuclear power projects, hydropower projects. So this in turn can help reduce our overall dependency on imported oil and gas. Because it's not just the transport sector, it's not just the energy sector. There are many other industries that depend on these essential commodities, from textiles to automobiles. Multiple sectors and industries have taken the hit. And right now, most industries are trying to absorb the rise in prices. They're not passing it down to the customers. But eventually, we will reach a stage where the prices will be felt at the retail level as well. Now, right now, one of the reasons why retail prices are quite subdued or suppressed is because the government has allowed export oriented units and special economic zones to sell their goods in the domestic market. Since global exports have been hit, supply chains have been disrupted, Indian exports have directly taken the hit. So the government has allowed SEZs and export oriented units to sell the goods in the domestic market, creating a flood of goods in the market. So though demand has remained the same, there is an increase in supply, which keeps the prices subdued and suppressed for a certain time period. But if the war continues, if the disruptions continue for a few more weeks and few more months, eventually these entities can't bear the higher cost of inputs. They will have to pass it down to the consumer. That's when you will see a sudden jump in retail inflation. So that's why the RBI, the Finance Ministry, and the Commerce Ministry will have to get their act together and start planning short, medium, and long term measures to shield the Indian economy as much as possible. And it also highlights why it is important for India to take a stand in the ongoing Iran conflict. This is not just some external conflict, it is a conflict that has directly hit India's core. And it's not just about ideology or whose side you're on, it's about protecting India's own national interests and economic interests. It's high time that India pressurizes all the actors to reach a viable solution and bring this conflict to an end as soon as possible, or else the Indian economy will continue to bleed. So that's a key lesson we can draw from this editorial. And please take up this mains practice question based on what we have discussed. Try to write your answers and practice your answer writing. Now let's move to the next topic, a very interesting article on the supplement page where Hindu publishes articles related to science and tech and environment and ecology. I always tell you, never ignore page 1 and 2. These are the two supplement pages in the online e-paper that is published. There are beautiful articles on science and tech and environment and ecology. Today's article focuses on malaria control. There is a novel method known as gene drive, which is being employed in research or simulated environments to achieve malaria control. And now the test has proven quite successful. So we might see the field trial of this technology and the eventual rollout of this genetic engineering technology to help control malaria. This is a topic under genetic engineering and tropical diseases. So first, let's talk about malaria itself. Why malaria is such a serious concern, a healthcare concern, not just in India, but across developing nations, particularly in tropical countries. Malaria is a very, very serious public health concern. Malaria is known for its quick escalation, where it can potentially turn fatal. It is spread by the Plasmodium category of parasites, primarily Plasmodium vivax, and it is carried or borne by vectors such as mosquitoes, especially the female Anopheles mosquito, which acts as the vector carrying the pathogen that leads to malaria. I'm sure many of you must be aware of the symptoms already. It results in high fever, severe body ache, severe chills, especially in the night time. And very quickly, the disease can escalate without the right medical intervention, and it can easily turn fatal as well. According to the World Health Organization, malaria is one of the most serious healthcare concerns across the world. As I said, especially in Asian, African, and Latin American countries. So, for the global south, for developing underdeveloped nations, especially in the tropical belt, wherever malaria is endemic, it is a serious public health concern. According to the World Malaria Report, please make a note of this. This can be a prelims fact. The World Malaria Report is published by the World Health Organization. According to the World Malaria Report, the global disease burden stands at 282 million cases as of 2024, with an estimated death count of more than 500,000. Close to 6 lakh people every year lose their lives because of malaria. So that is the reason why it is considered as one of the most dangerous public health concern. And especially African countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly children under the age of 5 years are highly prone and vulnerable. Africa has the highest disease burden with 95% of the malaria cases occurring in African nations. And children under the age of 5 account for 75% of all malaria deaths in the region. This data from the World Malaria Report is alarming. It's quite shocking, right? If you look at India as well, even India shares a considerable disease burden. So we do have malaria vaccines that WHO has rolled out, but the large scale adoption has not been feasible. There is a vaccine known as RTS S bar AS01 that WHO has encouraged, especially in African nations. It has proven to be quite effective as well. But it has not helped in achieving herd level immunity, mainly because of the poor health infrastructure that exists in Africa. There is a new second variant of the vaccine, which has also been rolled out, the Matrix M, that is supported by the WHO. But despite the availability of vaccines, governments across the world, they're not able to contain the spread of malaria. So when you look at India, WHO classifies India as part of Southeast Asia region. Though geographically we are a South Asian country, the WHO has a different geographical classification. In the Southeast Asia region, India is placed under the same category, and we have a disease burden of 58% within the Southeast Asia region. If you look at the global disease burden, we share 3% of the global disease burden. But India has done very, very well in the last decade. And the transmission rate, the death rate has come down quite significantly by almost 50%. India has a national framework for malaria elimination that was launched in 2016. And it has a goal of 2030 to completely eliminate malaria from the country. India has a goal to achieve malaria-free country status by 2027, by next year. And by the end of the decade, we want to ensure the elimination of malaria. So in the last decade or decade and a half, India has done pretty well with a near 50% reduction in the number of cases, in the death rate, and this points towards the success of our anti-malaria drive. Now, how do you tackle with such a disease, a vector-borne disease such as malaria? So there are different methods. To tackle malaria, one method is you take preventive steps. Ensure that mosquito bites are prevented, right? So for that, you can use mosquito nets, mosquito repellents. Ensure that mosquito breeding is controlled or altogether eliminated. This is often done by using insecticides. You might have seen in your apartment buildings, in your workplace, or in your cities and towns, municipal authorities, they regularly spray insecticides to prevent the breeding of mosquitoes. So these basic steps and measures will have to be taken to mitigate the spread of malaria, which is a preventive step. The other is therapeutic, where you focus on using anti-malarial drugs, which are proven to be effective to treat cases of malaria as quickly as possible. The right medical intervention at the right time can easily help contain the disease and prevent the death from occurring. So today we have very good therapeutics available, anti-malarial drugs available. Plus you have vaccines as well, which can be rolled out on a large scale. But all these methods, they do not address the root of the problem. So in genetic engineering, there is a new technology which is coming out known as gene drive, which can be employed to target the population of mosquitoes. The mosquito population itself can be directly targeted. And you can even eliminate the population theoretically. You can ensure that mosquitoes don't propagate, don't reproduce, thus leading to a sudden collapse of mosquito population over few generations. Or the other method is to modify the population. See, the elimination method will have its own risks. There can be a big ecological impact that we can't even understand as of now. Because under the elimination method, if you're trying to eliminate the entire population, by preventing its propagation, reproduction, then you can't anticipate the cyclical effect that will be seen on the entire ecosystem and the ecology and the food chain. So this is seen as a slightly riskier approach. So today, gene drive technology is helping in population modification, where you can ensure that the mosquitoes, even the female Anopheles, will not carry the Plasmodium parasites, and they will build immunity against it, so that even if a mosquito were to bite, it will not transmit the pathogen. So, what is this gene drive technology? That is what we need to understand. This is a prelims question and a mains question as well. Given that it's a new advancement in genetic engineering, UPSC can ask you, what is gene drive technology? See, this technology is being employed under a global research program known as Transmission Zero. Transmission Zero is an international research program focused on tackling malaria. It is led by the Imperial College in London in collaboration with the government of Tanzania, a East African country, which has a very high disease burden for malaria. So, researchers from across the world, especially from the Imperial College of London, are collaborating with researchers in Tanzania and WHO to experiment with gene drive technology. As of now, the experiment is limited to lab and simulated controls. But if it is implemented in the field and if it can become a success, then there is a possibility of modifying mosquito population or even eliminating the mosquito population entirely. So let's understand how exactly the technology works. In gene drive, genetic engineering is carried out by using the CRISPR-Cas9 method, a Nobel winning technology, which is a gene editing tool. This gene editing technology has won the Nobel Prize. And through this gene editing tool, the right cuts can be made in the genetic structure of the mosquitoes and ensure that a certain trait can be propagated to subsequent generations of mosquitoes. Now, generally, in any organism, when reproduction happens, just around 50% of the genetic trait is passed on to the offspring. Right? This is true in the case of humans as well. This is true with most of the organisms, where just around 50% of the genetic structure is passed on from one generation to another. Now, in gene drive, the focus is to increase this capacity to pass on the genetic traits to the next generation. Ensure that 90% of the genetic traits of the parent, especially the mother, is passed on to the next generation. That is the purpose of gene drive, where through precision gene cuts using CRISPR-Cas9, specific mutations can be introduced, which can basically turn a female mosquito infertile. This is one method where you're trying to suppress the population. Eventually, the goal is to eliminate the mosquito population itself. The female mosquitoes, they are altered in such a way that they will not reproduce, they'll become infertile. And you will see that within 3-4 generations, there will be a sudden drastic population collapse. So this method is called population suppression or population elimination. But however, this carries a ecological risk. Right? You can't really anticipate the bigger risk of wiping out an entire species. This can have a cascading effect, a butterfly effect, where it could lead to collapse of food chains, where it can affect many other dependent species. So this is considered as a more riskier approach. So the better approach is to use gene drive for population modification, or what is being called as replacement, population replacement. So here, the fertility is not being affected. Instead, the immunity of the mosquitoes to deal with the Plasmodium parasites is strengthened, so that the mosquitoes, they can fight the Plasmodium parasites. They don't basically become the bearers of the transmission. They don't act as the vectors anymore, right? So the mosquitoes can defeat the Plasmodium parasites within their body. So even if they bite a person, they will not really transmit the infectious parasites. So this method is being considered as the most preferred, the most viable. So successful trials have been conducted in a simulated environment, in a small simulated cage. Mosquito population has been experimented with using both population suppression and modification methods. In suppression, the entire cage population was wiped out within few weeks. In modification as well, it was shown that without wiping out the population, you can ensure that mosquitoes no longer carry the parasite. So this test was scaled up recently in Tanzania. In Tanzania, a much larger experiment was set up. From a small cage in a lab to a huge real world kind of facility was set up, where the trials have proven to be very successful. The gene drive rate is almost 94%, meaning 94% of the genetic traits were being passed down to the next generation. So once the trait is introduced, once this genetic change is introduced in one generation, there is a 94% chance it will pass down to the subsequent generations. So this can now be scaled up even further. Right now, it has never been introduced in the wild. It has never been tried out in the wild population where there are many more variable factors. But researchers are confident under the Transmission Zero project that if this initiative is scaled up, population modification is achievable, especially in high endemic areas. So this is a revolutionary technology made possible by CRISPR-Cas9, a gene editing tool through which specific gene cuts can be carried out and mutations can be introduced so that either the mosquito will become infertile or mosquitoes can fight the Plasmodium parasites and thus they will no longer be a vector for malaria. So please make a note of this topic, very important for your prelims and mains, and take up this answer writing question for your mains practice. Now, moving on, we have another important article on page 7 that deals with economy and as well as social justice. This article helps you understand the difference between welfare and development. I'll try to explain this as quickly and as briefly as possible. What's the difference between welfare and development? See, we often hear our political parties, especially when elections come up, they bring out these manifestos, right? They promise a number of socio-economic welfare programs to try and entice the voters, to attract the voters. They also promise a long-term development trajectory, saying that we'll build roads, we'll launch new railway routes, we'll provide more jobs, we'll provide cash transfer as well. So all sort of incentives are offered by political parties during election time. So how do you differentiate between a welfare program and a development program? What are the key differences between them? Now, generally, welfare programs, socio-economic welfare programs, they are implemented in the short term to achieve quick short-term results. Even the implementation is in the short term, and the results are also achieved in the short term. For example, it could be a cash transfer scheme. For example, in recent elections that we have seen, many parties have announced direct cash transfer for women voters. We saw that in Bihar, we saw that in Maharashtra, right? In Karnataka, populist schemes were announced. So every party resorts to this tactic: free bus for women, right? Or free electricity, loan waiver for farmers. So they are specifically targeting a vote bank, trying to entice and attract the voters. But it will provide for some improvement in the socio-economic status of the targeted beneficiaries. There's no doubt about it. But however, the results will have a short-term effect. It will only benefit a small section, and there is a risk of exclusion of the beneficiaries. There is a risk of leakages. where the actual beneficiaries may not benefit and the money is diverted for some other purpose, usually for a corrupt purpose. And it does not really create any long term capital. It doesn't really provide for a long term capacity for the society. So, under welfare, one type of welfare program would be your populist schemes that are often announced during elections, like loan waivers, cash transfer directly to a target vote bank, or free bus rides, or declaring all the loans to be waived off, or electricity bills to be made zero. All such populist announcements which are made, they are short term announcements designed to impress the voters. But these schemes, though it will help some of the targeted beneficiaries, it is not helpful in the long run because populist schemes are expensive. It carries a huge fiscal burden. It can be fiscally unsustainable, right? It can drain the exchequer of the state. And also, please understand, such welfare schemes, especially populist schemes, they are only addressing the consumption side of the problem. They will give a relief. For example, loan waiver will give a relief to the farming community. Direct cash transfer to women will, of course, place more financial independence in the hands of women voters. So it does bring some benefits. There's no one denying it. But it is primarily consumption driven. And thus, it has a very short term effect and it doesn't really contribute to nation building. There is another set of welfare programs. Don't think all welfare programs are populist. No. There are well designed, well implemented socio-economic welfare programs. For example, a job guarantee scheme like Manrega or specific conditional cash transfer schemes where an incentive model is created for farmers or certain industries, for example, where incentives are credited by the government if certain targets are met by the target population. So, such schemes can actually add value to the economy. Well planned, well implemented socio-economic welfare programs can add value. But this alone is not enough to develop your country. Development, on the other hand, is a long term process taking even decades. You can't see the impact of development in one electoral cycle. See, that's why parties have an inclination to announce welfare schemes because they bring short term relief. They create that short term impact on the ground and they'll claim success and credit and they'll try to impress the voters. Either they will launch populist schemes to immediately attract the vote bank, or they might even implement well planned socio-economic programs that can give results in 5 to 10 years. So the concerned government or party will claim the entire credit and again they'll try to impress the voters. But development is a long term story. Your industrial development, your agricultural development, your technological development. This happens with sustained investments over years and decades across governments. So, what a country requires is long term development because this is production oriented. If welfare programs are consumption oriented, development programs are production oriented. This will improve the skills in the country, it will add capacity, it will improve infrastructure, it will create that long term capital which will drive growth in the next few decades. So, what a country requires is development programs with complementing socio-economic welfare programs. Yes, you do need well planned socio-economic welfare programs that add value to the economy. What we don't need is populist schemes. You don't need populist welfare schemes. They are unsustainable, they are filled with flaws. It can exclude the beneficiaries, it can result in corruption because of leakages, it may never really benefit the targeted population. Even if it benefits them, it's only a short term impact, a short term relief without addressing the root problem. And more importantly, it's a big drain on your state exchequer. It's fiscally unsustainable. So, what we don't need is welfare schemes that are populist in nature, designed to attract voters. But we do need welfare schemes that are well planned and well implemented, well planned socio-economic programs that can supplement your long term development plans. It's a combination of these two that is necessary. You need long term development plans accompanied with short to medium term welfare schemes that are well planned and well implemented. So, this is what is required, a combination of welfare schemes with long term development orientation. So, this is what brings about genuine growth in the economy. And down the line, it will have a cascading effect, a compounding effect, where the improvement in capacity, improvement in skills, improvement in the overall structure of the economy will bring about all round welfare. And you see this impact only over 20, 30, 40 years, right? Nothing happens in the short term. Take for example, how India has quickly adopted digital payments, right? Of course, much of the credit is given to the rollout of UPI and the active push given by the government, right, in the last 10, 15 years. But that alone would not have led to this success. There would be years and decades of planning and effort behind it, which gave that maturity to India's banking system to quickly adopt digital payments. So that is the beauty of well planned welfare programs with long term development. So, what you don't require is essentially welfare schemes that are basically populist schemes. So, this is the key takeaway from this article. Next, on the front page, there is a tragic story from Tamil Nadu. Another man made disaster. Just a couple of days ago, we were talking about man made disasters. We spoke about industrial accidents, specifically boiler explosions that keep occurring in India. How many people were killed, many workers were killed in Chhattisgarh at a factory where industrial boilers were used. Now, these are recurring incidents in India, which highlights the lack of worker safety, the lack of industrial safety norms, the lack of disaster preparedness. When it comes to Tamil Nadu, one of the most frequent industrial disaster that is seen, it's in the firecracker industry. Tamil Nadu is famous for its firecrackers from Sivakasi to Virudnagar. And Tamil Nadu bears the entire brunt of accidents occurring in the firework industry. In Virudnagar alone, 134 people have been killed since 2022. Imagine the loss of human life, right? And across Tamil Nadu, if you take all the major regions that are involved in the firecracker industry, the number of deaths go up quite significantly. Just between April to August 2025, 21 people were killed in Virudnagar. Look at this infographic here. Tamil Nadu reported 79 deaths in 2023. 2024, 52 deaths were reported. And this trend has continued in 2025 and it's continuing this year as well. So in this tragic incident, 23 workers have been killed. So this again is a clear sign of the poor enforcement of safety rules and standards. Because firework industry is indeed a hazardous industry. See, first, the firework industry in Tamil Nadu was infamous for employing child labor. After decades of effort, child labor has largely been dealt with. But what we still haven't dealt with is the lack of safety norms, where factory owners regularly violate the norms. You take yesterday's incident, for example. It was a Sunday. The factory was not supposed to be open. But there were many workers mixing dangerous chemicals. And as per the rules of the state government, in these sheds where firework chemicals are mixed together, not more than 11 to 12 workers can be present in a given shed. This is a government regulation to ensure that any loss of human life can be minimized. But in this particular incident, more than 40 workers were working on a Sunday without permission. If the factory was to be open on a Sunday, they should have taken prior permission, which was not done, meaning there was no compliance with the existing safety rules and regulations. It's not that we don't have enough regulations. We have sufficient safety norms, but they are not followed, they are not implemented, they are not enforced strictly. Since it's a very hazardous industry, they deal with volatile chemicals and explosives. There is a strict restriction that every shed has to be spaced out. There are restrictions on how the explosive material has to be stored, that certain distance has to be maintained so that one fire doesn't trigger explosion in the other. Under each shed, there is a restriction on number of workers who can be present at the same time. Not more than 11 to 12 workers at the same time. But in this factory, in one shed, more than 40 workers were mixing this dangerous explosive. Thus, the loss of life is significantly higher. So this is a key lesson in regulatory enforcement, in disaster management and preparedness. These deaths are avoidable, but unfortunately, Indian workers keep paying the price, be it industrial accidents like boiler explosions or such fire explosions in firecracker industry. These are recurring disasters in India. Every year, several workers lose their lives and nobody pays the price eventually. Right? There's hardly any accountability. It even points towards a corrupt nexus between such factory owners who are flouting the rules and some of the corrupt government officials and politicians. So this incident should be a reminder for India to strictly enforce the safety norms, especially in hazardous industries, to mitigate and minimize such industrial tragedies. Next, on page 3, we have a study conducted in the Central Himalayas that helps us understand the hazard created by glaciers in the Himalayan belt. See, glaciers in the Himalayas, they are very prone to glacial retreat, especially because of global warming, rising temperatures. Glacial retreat has accelerated in the Himalayan belt. Now, I'll give you one small assignment. Can you find out how many documented glaciers are present across the Himalayan belt, starting from the Hindu Kush, Pakistan, India belt, all the way till the India Myanmar belt? Can you find out how many total glaciers are present, including Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet? Right? Find out the exact number of glaciers found across the Himalayan belt. How many of them are located in India? Just two facts you have to find out. Now, recently, a study was conducted on these glaciers, especially in Central Himalayas, particularly in the Uttarakhand region, as Uttarakhand is highly prone to disasters. Uttarakhand is prone to floods, it is prone to landslide, it is prone to snow and ice avalanche. It is known for glacial lake outburst floods. And as a result, it faces a significant high risk. And in many cases, these disasters are interconnected to one another, where one disaster can trigger the other. So a team of researchers from Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, along with IIT Bhubaneswar and DRDO Chandigarh, they have carried out a long-term study of the glacial formations in Central Himalayas, and they have flagged a new risk. They have identified that hanging glaciers pose the biggest risk in Central Himalayas. Now, what do you mean by these hanging glaciers? Hanging glaciers are essentially the glacial structures that you find on steep slopes of the mountains. They are basically attached to the steep slope of a mountain and they can easily break apart. They can get ripped apart very easily because they are in a precarious position and they would have accumulated huge amounts of ice, and glacial retreat adds to the problem. Global warming increases the chances of this hanging glacier losing its structural integrity and collapsing at one go, which can result in a mass wasting event. Mass wasting is where there is a sudden movement of that material. It could be earth material, which triggers a landslide, right? It could be rocks that triggers a rock landslide. Or in this case, it could be the snow and ice that has accumulated, which could trigger a deadly avalanche. These researchers have identified 219 such hanging glaciers in Uttarakhand just in the Alkananda basin. In the upper Alkananda basin, They've identified 219 high risk hanging glaciers which can disintegrate and collapse at any time. And don't forget, this this region of the Ganga is also the location of many pilgrimage sites. There are many small towns and human habitations that are present, right? From Badrinath to Kedarnath to Hanuman Chatti. Multiple pilgrimage sites are located in this belt, and the research has pointed out the heightened risk of disasters triggered by avalanches. And they have conducted simulated modeling studies. And according to the modeling studies, if these hanging glaciers were to break and result in a snow ice avalanche, it can completely crash into the settlements present downstream, and it can bring 50 meters of ice and snow, which can completely cover and submerge the entire human settlement. So, this poses a very significant threat for human life and infrastructure. There are many important roads that are present in this region. There are important hydropower plants that are located over here. There are populated towns and villages located over here. So, any tragedy, any hazard which can turn into an avalanche, right? It can become a major disaster in this region. That's a stark warning that comes out of this new research. And it's also important to note that based on such studies, you can create a better hazard profile and vulnerability profile. Once you identify these most prone glaciers, you can keep a better watch. You can maintain better surveillance using satellites and drones. See, it might be practically impossible to monitor the entire Himalayan stretch for such glaciers. But once you zero down on the high risk glaciers, if there is heightened surveillance maintained, and if you watch them regularly, there can be some early warning, some forecasting available that will give enough time to carry out a timely evacuation so that the loss of human life can be reduced, can be mitigated during such disasters. And also, don't forget, when such a large amount of ice and snow crashes down into the valley, it can even create an artificial lake, just like how a rock or mud landslide can create artificial dams in the downstream. Similarly, a snow ice avalanche can also hold back a lot of water behind it, triggering the formation of an artificial lake for some time. Now, this could breach very easily. This natural dam like structure, which would have formed, it can breach very easily, triggering flash floods. So, it can lead to multiple secondary disasters. So that is why this study can be helpful to understand the hazard present in the glacial belt of Himalayas, especially Central Himalayas, where hanging glaciers pose a major threat with regard to avalanches and floods. Now let's move to the next topic. Tensions are again rising between US and Iran because the ceasefire deadline is approaching. The temporary 2 week ceasefire, it expires this Wednesday. That's hardly a couple of days to go. And both US and Iran have made repeated U-turns on their promises and commitments. Right? Iran had said that it has completely opened Hormuz Strait, and now they have reversed it. The US continues to blockade Hormuz and continues to target Iranian vessels and Iranian ports. So now, United States has said that it's ready for the next round of talks. It has already dispatched the negotiating team to Pakistan today, and it is expected that the next round of talks are likely to take place. US Vice President JD Vance with Trump's special envoy to West Asia, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. They're arriving in Pakistan today, and they'll be awaiting the Iranian delegation led by Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. But however, according to latest reports, the talks are falling apart. Iran has said that they will not participate. At the last minute, it appears that Iran is trying to pull out. Why? Because Iran feels that the US is exerting maximal pressure and demanding excessive concessions and compromises from the Iranian side. Because see, the US is expecting nothing short of an abject surrender. US wants Iran to give a guarantee that it will end the nuclear weapons program and hand over its stockpile of enriched uranium. Whereas Iran has denied ever making such commitments, and Iran is unlikely to give up its nuclear weapons program. It's unlikely to hand over its stockpile of enriched uranium. So this has led to a new standoff. With Iran not opening up Hormuz, the US also continuing its blockade, the tensions have persisted. And as we discussed yesterday, the IRGC has opened fire on some of the commercial cargo vessels. And recently it has been reported that US Navy has opened fire on IRGC gunboats. So tensions are rising, and if the Iranian delegation does not participate in the talks, let's say the Iranian delegates don't even go to Pakistan, as it has been reported few hours ago, or let's say the talks take place but eventually it fails because the American demands are maximalist demands. Iran would never agree to such maximalist demands. So if there is no breakthrough between them, if Pakistan does not work out a viable solution between them, most likely the war is going to resume, maybe tonight itself or by tomorrow. And Trump has again sworn to destroy Iran's critical infrastructure. He has said every power plant and bridge in Iran would be blown and destroyed. Any such mass attack on critical infrastructure of a country can even be labeled as a war crime, a crime against humanity. So things are again heating up. Oil prices have risen, and there's every prospect of the war resuming if the talks were to fail. So that is one latest update. So the other development here is that India has carried out a timely evacuation of some of the remaining citizens and the family members of the diplomats who are stationed in Indian missions in Iran. See, when the war broke out on 28th Feb, India did not have enough time to carry out large scale evacuations. Though a few thousand students and few Indian nationals were evacuated, many of them were hesitant and they still remained in Iran even when the war was continuing. And of course, the diplomatic staff, they continue to man our missions, and some of their family members were also present. But now the ceasefire gave a window for India. The ceasefire reduced the risk, and India has carried out a fresh evacuation. Right? Even during the war, during March, we did evacuate some Indians, and now a fresh evacuation has been carried out where family members of the diplomats and as well as several other Indians have been brought back. More than 2,000 plus Indians, 2,400 Indians have been assisted by the Indian missions in Iran. See, India has an embassy in Tehran. The embassy will continue to function. We also have a consulate at Bandar Abbas, a strategic port of Iran on the Persian Gulf, and both places have seen heavy fighting and bombardment by US and Israel. So the Indian staff have performed very bravely, courageously, because they have to hold the fort till the last minute, right? And it's unlikely that India will be shutting the diplomatic missions. We need channels of communication. So all the unnecessary staff, they are being evacuated. Family members are being evacuated. We even had a Kendriya Vidyalaya. So all the teachers and the staff members, they are being evacuated. Then a lot of Indian medical students, especially from Jammu and Kashmir, go to Iran to study, even from Karnataka as well. Then there are religious seminaries in Shia Islam, which are very sacred for Shia Muslims in India. So a lot of scholars and religious students from India would also be present in Iran. A lot of Indian businessmen, right, and seafarers and mariners, they were also trapped in Iran. So all of them are being rescued and evacuated. Now you should know the routes that we are using for the evacuation mission. See, from Tehran and as well as from Bandar Abbas, the Indian nationals are primarily being moved through the road route. Since air evacuation is too risky and almost impossible, given the closure of the airspace and the heightened aerial combat which is taking place, air evacuation is almost near impossible. So road evacuation is the easiest for us. So one set of Indians have been taken across the border into Azerbaijan. They've been taken into Azerbaijan via Astra. That's one key location you need to note down. From Azerbaijan, from Baku, they have been airlifted to India. This has been one evacuation route, right? Because Azerbaijan shares this northern border. So some Indians have been evacuated through Astra directly into Baku, and from there they have been evacuated through air route. Another set of Indians, they have been taken into Armenia, a very friendly country for India. Right? They've been brought into Armenia through this narrow land corridor. Now, can you find out the name of this land corridor? See, here you can see the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which was at the center of conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that recently Azerbaijan has captured from Armenia. You can also see a Azerbaijani exclave, Nakhchivan exclave over here. And there is a small patch of Armenia located over here. So can you identify what is this land corridor? It's through this land corridor that Indians have been moved by the Indian embassy from Iran to Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, from where they have been airlifted. So these are the two evacuation routes that have been used. The reason why we are talking about this is because UPSC tends to focus on these topics. When the Ukraine war began and when India carried out Operation Ganga to evacuate 20,000 plus Indians, most of the medical students, there was a direct question on the neighboring countries of Ukraine, because the neighboring countries like Hungary, Romania, they were used by India for carrying out the evacuation. So please be aware of the local geography, and that can be very important for your prelims. Next, India's Vice President CP Radhakrishnan has carried out a very, very important visit to Sri Lanka. It comes at a critical time because right now Sri Lanka is staring at a massive energy crisis because of the Iran war. Please understand, Sri Lanka depends heavily on India for energy supplies. Much of Sri Lanka's petrol, diesel, gas requirements, they are met from India. It's Indian refiners who supply this to Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka has a critical dependency. And we have some key projects that require further push from the Indian side that steps up Indian presence and influence in Sri Lanka. So the visit of the Vice President is critical for 2-3 reasons. See, Sri Lanka was recently hit by a deadly cyclone. In 2025 November, right, Sri Lanka suffered a massive impact because of this deadly cyclone. And India was the one which provided massive assistance. We helped in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to carry out search and rescue operations. We provided immediate relief by supplying first aid, medical aid, food supplies, etc. Now we have planned a $450 million development package to rehabilitate the cyclone affected population, especially fishermen have been displaced. So India has taken up a very ambitious housing project to rebuild some of the destroyed and damaged houses to accommodate and resettle the affected population. So this is a humanitarian initiative of India, where initially we assisted during the disaster in search and rescue operations and providing emergency assistance. Now we are helping in the long-term reconstruction and recovery by building a housing project in Sri Lanka. Along with that, India and Sri Lanka are discussing a very ambitious strategic project at Trincomalee port. See, Trincomalee is a strategic port for Sri Lanka, located on its east coast. You can see that in the map over here. So Trincomalee is home to these oil tank farms. They are massive oil storage facilities that were built by the British during Second World War. Now these oil facilities not only serve Sri Lanka's energy interests, even India relies on it. India is the one which primarily feeds these oil tank farms. But these farms have become outdated. The tanks are outdated. They were built in 1940s by the British. So for many years, India has proposed a new project to revamp the oil tank farms at Trincomalee, which is a strategic seaport that could bring energy security to Sri Lanka and set up Trincomalee as an energy hub of the Indian Ocean region. It's primarily Indian refiners and Indian oil companies that operate out of here. So there is a proposed oil pipeline as well. India and Sri Lanka are working with United Arab Emirates to set up an oil pipeline that can link southern India from Tamil Nadu towards Trincomalee port and the oil tank farms. These projects, they were delayed because of constant Chinese interference. China had repeatedly ensured that these Indian projects would not take off by working with anti-India leaders such as the Rajapaksa brothers. When Mahinda and Gotabaya Rajapaksa were in power, they ensured that these Indian projects would not go ahead as they were primarily seen as pro-China leaders. But now, with India improving its ties under Anura Kumara Dissanayake, India is pushing ahead with the oil tank farm project. It's a long held dream of India to fulfill this ambitious strategic project and set up Trincomalee as an energy hub. And eventually, we want to set up a pipeline with help from UAE so that the energy requirements of Sri Lanka is taken care of. It will help India's energy requirements as well, and it will cement the close ties between the two countries. Now, let's move to the next topic. The central government has recently announced the procurement of potatoes from farmers in Uttar Pradesh. UP farmers are facing a dire situation. Those who have cultivated potatoes, they have seen a massive price drop because of various factors. There has been unseasonal rain because of western disturbances, and the prices have taken a direct hit. So, to support the farmers in Uttar Pradesh who have grown potatoes, they have been harvested, and if it's not procured, right, it'll go to waste, it'll start rotting. First of all, we don't have good storage and warehousing facilities. That's why the central government has stepped in. It has announced a procurement plan, and it will be procuring potatoes from farmers at 6.5 rupees per kilogram. But the farmers are very angry about this because the prices fixed by the center is very, very low. The farmers are saying this will not even account for the input cost. If the center was procuring potatoes at the rate of 12 to 15 rupees per kg, approximately like 1,500 rupees plus per quintal per 100 kilograms, that would have been beneficial for farmers, right? It would have helped the farmers avert the losses, and thus it would give a big relief to the agrarian community. But right now, the procurement price announced by the government is just half of what the farmers are expecting. So, this again highlights the dire situation faced by Indian farmers. Whenever such price fluctuation happens or the market is not favorable, right, farmers are always at the receiving end. And this could directly drive up farmer suicides. It could bring more stress on the rural agrarian economy. So, this raises the importance of cold storage, warehousing facilities, strengthening food processing. Because if food processing companies can procure the potatoes, right, they'll have better storage, better technology. They can add value to the product, right? They can turn the raw material into various consumable goods and commodities, thus increasing the shelf life, and it can create a sustained income for the farmers. So it's very, very critical in all the agrarian states to promote cold storage, warehousing, and food processing industries, where the shelf life of the harvested products can increase and value addition can be done so that farmers need not resort to distress selling. Many times, farmers sell at such cheap prices. Sometimes they even dump the products on the road and they leave without collecting even 1 rupee because they are not insulated from sudden price fluctuations. Government procurement alone will not help. This is again a short term measure. And as I said, government prices are very low. It will not even cover the input cost of the farmers. So, what you need, they are long term solutions, such as investments in cold storage, warehousing, and more encouragement for food processing industries. Now, let's look at the prelim section, just two articles, and we will end the session after that. On page 5, the Hindu carries this image. This image is depicting the healthy mangrove forest cover that you see in the famous Buckingham Canal, which is a key waterway along the east coast of India, along the Coromandel coast, right? So let's quickly talk about the Buckingham Canal and the relevance of the mangrove forest present over here. The Buckingham Canal stretches close to 800 kilometers, almost 796 kilometers, connecting Kakinada, a major port, a historic and strategic port in Andhra Pradesh, with the Chennai Viluppuram region, and it is part of National Waterway number 4 that extends all the way till Puducherry. So from Kakinada via Chennai to Puducherry, there is this strategic waterway built along the Buckingham Canal, which is a British era structure. It was built during colonial rule, and it's a salt water canal that aids navigation along the east coast of India. It hugs the Coromandel coastline, and it is very useful for navigation from Andhra Pradesh towards Tamil Nadu and Puducherry. So mangrove cover was quite extensive in this belt, but over years it had been eroded, it had been largely destroyed. But the 2004 tsunami exposed the gaps, it exposed the weakness and the lack of disaster preparedness. The destruction of the mangrove cover was largely responsible for the widespread devastation seen across Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh during the deadly Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. Following this, the state governments, especially Tamil Nadu, and as well as the central government, has carried out mangrove afforestation. Today, we have a dedicated scheme, Mishti, to focus on mangrove afforestation. And the mangrove cover has improved significantly in the last 10-15 years. This is part of our disaster preparedness as well, because mangrove cover acts as a natural buffer along the coastline. It's a natural protective layer. Any tree cover can be useful, but mangroves are much more resilient. Mangroves can withstand high speed winds and the coastal floods that kick in during a cyclone or during tsunamis, and they act as a critical natural buffer that can mitigate the impact of a disaster. So these are the key points you need to note down. Next, the last topic, a very, very big development in international relations. Israel is opening up towards Latin American countries, starting with Argentina. It's a very controversial development as well. They have signed something called the Issac Accords. Argentina's controversial far right wing president, Javier Milei, is on a visit to Israel during wartime. And during this visit, Argentina has become the first Latin American country to sign the Issac Accords, through which Israel is trying to strengthen its relations. Not just diplomatic ties, but even strategic and religious relations as well with the Latin America region. Now, why is this concerning? This is quite concerning because the name tells you the clear religious connotation attached to it. It's a biblical reference. It is inspired by the Abraham Accords that were signed in 2020. What are the Abraham Accords? The Abraham Accords of 2020 that was mediated by United States, by Donald Trump. It led to the normalization of relations between United Arab Emirates and Israel. It was a groundbreaking event because UAE became the third Arab nation to recognize Israel and set up relations with Israel. Is that clear? After Egypt and Jordan, no other Arab country in Middle East, North Africa region had recognized Israel. UAE became the third country by signing the Abraham Accords. This was followed by Bahrain, which also signed Abraham Accords and recognized Israel and established diplomatic relations with Israel. This was bringing a sense of normalcy to the region. Then US even convinced African countries such as Sudan and Morocco to recognize Israel and set up ties with Israel. But they did not sign the Abraham Accords. Sudan and Morocco are not signatories to Abraham Accords. They have not signed it. They have signed parallel deals with Israel, recognizing the country and setting up relations with the country. See, any normalization of the West Asian conflict is good news. But what is concerning is the American attempt to work with Israel and create a sort of a religious connotation to it. Right? The name Abraham Accords is a biblical reference again. This fundamentally altered the equations in the Arab world, as UAE which is a leading Sunni power, broke from Saudi Arabia and other Sunni countries and recognized Israel along with Bahrain. Now, Israel is attempting to do the same with Latin America, where there is a clear Christian Jewish angle to the Isaac Accords that are being pushed. See, Javier Milei is a very controversial leader from the far right wing, aligned with white supremacy and radical right wing extreme Christian ideology. That is something Trump also aligns with. So, this sort of nexus that is forming across the world between far right wing nationalist and radical Christian elements with the military approach of the Jewish state of Israel raises concerns because this could lead to a fundamental altering of the Palestinian issue itself, right? So Israel would like to push forward with the Isaac Accords with other Latin American countries where Christianity plays a big role. And it's trying to invoke that religious angle, bringing those biblical references, right? The Bible refers to this ancient land. And there are reports that in Israel, you have certain extremist leaders who are pushing for the creation of a so called Greater Israel, seeking further expansion through military involvement and covert involvement in the region, stretching from the Sinai Desert in Egypt all the way till Iraq, Iran, and covering Syria and Lebanon, even parts of Saudi Arabia. So these developments, it will further destabilize the region, right? Because any rise in extremism on any side, be it the radical Iranian regime or be it what Israel is attempting to do, it further destabilizes this sensitive region. So please make a note of the Isaac Accords. We'll continue to track this development because apart from Argentina, Israel is pushing other Latin American countries as well to sign the Isaac Accords. On this note, I bring the session to an end. I hope it was an interesting and useful analysis. If you benefited from it, please press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.